Mark never meant to uncover anything that day. He just forgot his wallet. But that simple mistake turned into the moment everything changed. At first, the shock nearly knocked the air out of him. Hearing Diana's voice in that tense whisper, realizing something was terribly wrong, it felt like the ground shifted beneath him. But looking back, Mark would one day call it the blessing that broke the illusion. For years, he'd lived in comfort, thinking love meant routine and trust meant silence. He hadn't noticed how far apart they drifted, how much of himself he'd set aside to keep the peace. That morning, when he stepped through the side entrance and froze in the hallway, it wasn't just his marriage that cracked. It was the fog. The quiet numbness he hadn't even realized he was living in started to lift. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it changed everything. But it also set him free. The truth, painful as it was, became a gift. Because only through knowing what was real could he begin to build something better. That moment didn't ruin him. It revealed him. And for that, Mark would always be grateful. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is just the first step toward your best one. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something had guided him to park on the street that day. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was fate. But as he stood quietly in the hallway, heart beating fast, listening to Diana's whispered confession on the phone, he realized his instincts had never failed him. They had just been drowned out by routine. Later, when he sat alone in his car, trying to make sense of what he'd heard, Mark wasn't just grappling with betrayal. He was confronting a deeper truth. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking questions. He had accepted comfort over clarity. Diana's words, panicked, urgent, and laced with deceit, cut through the haze he didn't even know he'd been living in. That night, as he sat across from her at the dinner table, watching her smile like everything was fine, he felt both heartbreak and strange relief. For the first time in years, he saw her. Not the woman he loved, but the version she had become. The mask was slipping, and beneath it, he recognized a stranger. And in that moment, a quiet voice inside him said, "This is your chance." Not just to walk away, but to wake up, to trust that intuition that had stirred, even in silence. To honor the part of himself that had known all along. Love without truth is just performance. And he deserved more than an act. He deserved something real. That was the moment Mark stopped ignoring the signs and started listening. Mark didn't rage. He didn't scream, throw accusations, or demand answers. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He observed. In the days that followed, he became a master of silence, wearing calm like a second skin. While Diana carried on with her carefully curated smiles and casually timed affection, Mark watched. He noticed the small tells, the way her eyes flicked a second too long at her phone, the slightly oversweet tone in her voice, the sudden interest in routines she'd long neglected. But he didn't confront her. Not yet. He understood now that control wasn't loud, it was quiet, deliberate. At night, while she soaked in her eucalyptus-scented bubble baths, he scrolled through financial records, connected the dots, and unearthed buried truths. Each discovery fueled a new kind of strength in him, one not born of vengeance, but of resolve. He started journaling again, filling pages not with anger, but clarity. He wasn't spiraling, he was anchoring. For the first time in a long while, Mark felt present in his own life. The silence, once filled with numbness, now buzzed with intent. Every calm breath he took was a decision to act with precision, not emotion. Diana thought he was drifting, but he wasn't. He was planting his feet, gathering his strength, and preparing for the moment when truth would no longer be whispered, but spoken aloud. In the quiet, Mark wasn't lost. He was sharpening, and soon, she would realize still waters don't mean still hearts. They mean something deeper is moving beneath the surface. Each night after Diana went to bed, Mark transformed their quiet home into a crime scene of secrets. Only he wasn't solving a murder, he was dissecting a betrayal. He scoured every account they had ever touched, tracing breadcrumbs across statements, receipts, and online histories like a forensic pathologist with a broken heart. That's when he found it, 2 neatly labeled transfers to Everwell Strategies. The name alone felt suspicious, but it was the perfect kind of bland, the kind designed to slip past suspicion. 1 click turned into 10. Mark dove deep, following the digital trail to an ancient, barely functioning website riddled with broken links and buzzwords that felt like smoke and mirrors. But the more he looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just shady, it was criminal. Offshore holdings in Belize, Zero tax footprint. The hallmarks of a shell company used to wash money clean. His pulse quickened, not with panic but purpose. This was no accident. Diana hadn't misclicked her way into this mess. This was deliberate, planned. Mark pulled every statement he could find, every piece of mail she forgot to shred, every loan form she thought he'd never see. His own name stared back at him in tight, unfamiliar handwriting. It wasn't a gut punch anymore. It was fuel. With every document, every signature that wasn't his, Mark stopped feeling like a victim and started becoming something else entirely, a man taking his power back. The truth was ugly, but it was his, and that made all the difference. The name J. Maddox Consulting had lingered in the back of Mark's mind like a bad dream he couldn't quite remember. It didn't belong, not in their finances, not in their life. So he kept digging, relentless, until it clicked. Jake Maddox, Diana's ex, the reckless flame she once called a beautiful disaster, the one she swore had no place in her future. But there he was again, wearing a cheap suit and a slick online persona, now labeled a consultant. Mark stared at the screen in disbelief, memories surfacing like unwelcome guests. Jake, the same man who wrecked her car, begged her parents for money, got arrested for fraud, and yet somehow always landed on his feet. Diana used to joke that Jake could charm a snake. But even snakes have venom. And now, this venom had seeped into Mark's life, coiling through forged documents and false invoices, all tied back to him. Rage simmered beneath the surface. But Mark kept still. He needed answers, not theatrics. The betrayal wasn't just financial anymore. It was intimate, tangled in the memory of every story Diana had once told him about Jake's recklessness, all while secretly funneling money to him. It wasn't just that she lied. It was that she rewrote their shared history and cast Mark as a fool in the process. But fools don't uncover empires built on fraud. And Mark, now more than ever, knew he wasn't the naive man she thought he was. He wasn't backing down. He was gearing up. Mark didn't slam doors. He set traps, while Diana hummed in the kitchen, swirling her wine like nothing was unraveling beneath her feet. Mark was already playing chess. She still believed she had the upper hand, mistaking his quiet for ignorance. But Mark had moved past fury. He was operating with surgical precision. That night, while she slipped in her nightly bath ritual, candles lit, lavender fog curling from the hallway, Mark moved through her home office like a ghost. He knew every creaky floorboard, every shadow. Behind the bookshelf, tucked in a hollowed-out space she once used to hide birthday gifts, he planted the device, a discreet, motion-activated recorder synced silently to his phone. And then he waited. 2 days later, the notification lit up his screen like a siren. He ducked into a quiet corner at work, earbuds in, heart thrumming. Her voice came through, crisp, conspiratorial. "He's buying it," Diana said. "If we move this week, it's clean." Jake calmed down. Then the name, Globier, the shell company Joseph had flagged. It was all there. Every word another nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed lie. Mark didn't feel triumph. He felt clarity. He wasn't imagining things. He wasn't overthinking. He was right. Diana wasn't just complicit. She was orchestrating it. And Jake, her partner in crime, was panicking. Mark knew what came next. Not confrontation. Not chaos. But strategy. The trap had been set. The proof was in his pocket. And soon, her entire house of cards would come crashing down. When the evening came, Mark took control, not with harsh words or threats, but with ambience, timing, and truth served on a silver platter. He cooked dinner himself, carefully selecting the wine Diana liked to hoard for special occasions, the one she guarded like it was liquid gold. The table was set just right, candles flickering, linen napkins folded into delicate triangles, salmon grilled with rosemary and lemon, her favorite. She walked in, glowing and unsuspecting, dressed in softness and ease, her smile radiating a warmth that nearly fooled him. Suspiciously romantic, she teased. Mark only smiled. Thought we deserved a little quiet time. Over dinner, they talked about everything but the storm beneath the surface. The weather, a neighbor's new puppy, a movie neither of them had finished. She laughed, sipped, relaxed, never knowing the final course wasn't cheesecake, but revelation. When the moment came, he reached under the chair and pulled out the folder labeled Truth. She blinked, confused. He slid it toward her. Inside, forged loan applications, fake invoices, offshore transfers, screenshots, and, sitting on top, a transcript. Her voice, her plan, Her betrayal. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The evidence was louder than any scream. He watched her face crumble page by page, watched her carefully constructed reality collapse. "You used me," he said, voice like stone, "and now I'm done pretending." It wasn't revenge. It was release. In that moment, Mark wasn't just confronting her. He was freeing himself from her lies, and from the version of love that asked him to stay blind. The days that followed were both chaotic and clarifying. Mark filed for divorce without hesitation. No drawn-out fights, no second guesses. The paperwork cited everything: financial fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and identity misuse. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the closing of a chapter written in half-truths and forged signatures. Diana, ever the actress, tried to maintain appearances. She brewed coffee, left little sticky notes with hearts, and hovered in doorways asking, "Do we really have to do it this way?" But Mark had already answered. With every no, he reclaimed a part of himself she'd spent years silencing. Then came her lawyer, all sharp suits and rehearsed charm, offering private settlements to avoid exposure. Exposure. That's what they feared, not justice, not guilt. Mark refused. He wasn't sweeping this under the rug. He wanted sunlight. He wanted the truth documented, public, and permanent. The subpoenas came next, followed by audits and deposition after deposition. Diana sat in stiff conference rooms, her voice shaky as she listened to her own words played back to her, words she never imagined anyone would hear. Jake tried to vanish, but federal investigators don't scare easily. When the threat of arrest hit, he reappeared, sweaty, cornered, and lawyered up. Mark never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His silence, backed by facts and integrity, spoke volumes. While they scrambled to cover their tracks, Mark stood still, unmoved, unwavering. Because the truth wasn't just his weapon. It was his freedom, and he wasn't letting it go. 3 months later, Mark stood on the back deck of his new home, a modest A-frame cabin nestled between whispering pines, far from the noise of courthouse parking lots and rooms filled with lies. The morning was cool, the kind that kissed your skin instead of stinging it, and he cradled a mug of strong black coffee. No more sugar, no more pretense. The house was smaller, yes, but it breathed peace. No more shared closets full of secrets. No more kitchen drawers hiding invoices and betrayal. Just with stone, books, and space that finally felt like his. He'd started running again. His lungs burned, but in the best way. His muscles ached with the kind of pain that reminded him he was alive. He hired new accountants, rewrote his business security protocols, and tightened every gate in his financial world. He slept better, solid, dreamless nights. And he even laughed, sometimes just because the moment called for it. When people asked if he missed Diana, he smiled gently. "I miss who I thought she was," he'd say, but that person never really existed. And there, in that clarity, he found joy. Not the kind built on fantasy or forced smiles, but the quiet kind. The kind that lingers in the corners of a clean house and rises with the steam from a morning cup. Mark didn't just survive betrayal. He rebuilt a life more honest, more grounded, and more beautiful than the illusion he left behind. And in every breath, he was finally free. Mark never needed Diana's apology, and when it finally arrived, handwritten and trembling with regret, it felt more like a confession without consequence than a true reckoning. The envelope had no return address, but the floral script was unmistakable. She wrote of sleepless nights and lost direction, of hoping he might one day remember the good times and not just the ruin. Mark read it once. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He simply felt done. He folded the letter neatly, struck a match, and watched it burn in the kitchen sink, its ashes swirling down the drain like the last remnants of a life he no longer belonged to. Closure, he realized, doesn't come from apologies or explanations. It comes when you finally stop needing anything from the person who broke you. No answers, no validation, no redemption, just peace. Diana had chosen her path, and Mark had chosen his, forward. He spent his days creating, running, rebuilding, not to escape the past, but to honor the future. Because healing wasn't forgetting. It was remembering with strength. And every sunrise over those pine trees reminded him, clarity is freedom, and joy is never borrowed. In today's world, trust is precious, and so is your intuition. If something feels off, don't silence that voice inside you. Pay attention to the details, protect your boundaries, and never be afraid to seek truth, even when it hurts. Whether in relationships or finances, transparency is a form of love, and so is accountability. Like Mark, you have the power to choose peace over performance, truth over illusion. Healing begins not when others apologize, but when you decide you deserve better. So build wisely, guard your worth, and remember, clarity is a gift, and you never have to stay in the dark.